Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared, and with me today I have Tyler Cragen. If you're new to the channel, he's been on the show a couple times. He's actually been with the channel or watching me since pretty much the very beginning, and he started up his own YouTube channel. It's called The Greatest Cause. It's in my featured channels if you go to my homepage, but I'm also going to put the link for his channel in the description below. So make sure to subscribe to him because he puts out good content. And so we were just going to chat today because it's been a while. And well, we were going to talk a little bit about a couple different things. Deception from, the world right now, a little bit about you wanted to talk about James E. Talmage a little bit.
Yeah, Jesus the Christ specifically.
Yeah. And so what was going on with that?
Yeah, I guess to be a little bit more specific, um, I guess maybe just talking more about the plan of salvation in general and having an understanding of the plan of salvation. Um, well, before I get into that, I just want to say thanks for having me on again. It's good to see you. Have we talked since before this last general conference? It's been a minute.
Yeah, it has been a while. I want to say it was probably sometime before. I'm sure that we've spoken once between the two general conferences last year.
Hmm.
That's my best guess.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. General October General Conference is crazy. I know that was so like 3 months ago, but like,
It was
just kidding.
crazy. I think
But
all of us are still trying to like wrap our minds around what was said and just like maybe the significance of
mhm.
that particular general conference.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like so some of my subscribers who might be watching this because we definitely share some subscribers. They might have noticed that I haven't been posting for about a month. And the reason why I bring that up is because well, for one, I had COVID, and that was a whole thing.
Oh
But
gosh.
yeah, yeah, not fun, but um, didn't kill me, so that's great.
Hmm.
Um, and the reason why I bring that up too is I I feel like my time away from the channel has allowed me to take in a lot more information instead of just constantly trying to share every week.
Hmm.
Um, and I bring up General Conference because, sorry, I feel like I'm all over the place, so forgive me.
No, that's
But
okay.
uh, President Nelson's talk, "Overcome the World and Find Rest." Um, I mean, there's so much gold in there. But the his apostolic blessing that he gave, I was just listening to it again for like the millionth time today, and I noticed a few things in there, and it's gonna tie back into the James E. Talmage thing.
Hmm.
Um, but he essentially had blessed us to have the ability to overcome the world, um, and to learn more about the Savior, to um, to denounce or not denounce deception, to discern truth from error, and to help those in need. And I feel like I've learned a lot about those specific things that he shared in that, particularly about Jesus Christ. I mean, that's obviously this is his church, um, but I felt impressed to start reading Jesus the Christ, and I'm only a few chapters in, but I just had an epiphany like a month ago or a few weeks ago, and that is we all need to have a deeper understanding of the plan of salvation, um, if we want to survive spiritually, if we want to survive in this world,
Yeah.
because things are getting so much harder. And my mom, she to me, she's a spiritual giant. She always has like these really great um, phrases she says, and one of those things is she'll be talking about someone, or like maybe there are people who are like going against the church or something, or maybe are struggling with something. And sometimes, like, I've heard her say out of frustration, if people just understood the plan. And I always thought that was funny. And when I was like a teenager hearing that, or like a really young adult hearing that, I would be like, well, that's oversimplifying things, or that is, uh, I guess you would say, just maybe dismissive of people and their struggles, or maybe their grievances with like church or church history, whatever it may be. And I thought, well, that's kind of, oversimplifying things. But as I was reading James E. Talmage's Jesus the Christ, um, just the sections about the premortal life of well, all of us, our premortal life, and the grand council in heaven, Satan's descent, you start to realize really quickly just so many little principles here and there. And even though we all understand the plan of salvation, we're here to gain mortal bodies, to have agency. I don't think I think sometimes we forget exactly what that is, or exactly why Satan's plan was not going to work. And for me, going more in depth into that by James E. Talmage's words in this book, it allowed me to just I felt like my thoughts just expanded so much. And it's hard for me to express just how I feel about that, but I'm going to try. And I feel like having a greater understanding of exactly why Satan's plan didn't work and why we need Jesus Christ, it allows us to handle our trials better. It allows us to have more patience with each other and with our circumstances. And I'm sure people are watching this being like, well, duh, dude. I think a lot of people who are watching this are pretty smart. I mean, clearly they're interested in things like the second coming, and they're, as we know, and as you know more than all of us, how deep that goes, how many facets of, how many appendages there are to just that one point of doctrine, that one point, that one part of the plan of salvation. And I think sometimes we get caught up in our own phrases or our own rote ways of thinking, or we get too caught up in like a handful of one-off quotes or something, that we sometimes forget, hey, let's look a little bit deeper into the basics of things.
So do you think there's like people that are starting, because like as you're talking, I'm thinking about, okay, what are some things that you might be referring to, like, things that Satan's trying to do right now that's causing us all trouble.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that's making us need to overcome the world? And one thing that was coming to mind, I don't know if this is part of what you're getting at, is do you think that people are starting to be convinced that they don't really have a need of a savior? Just like, because there's a lot of like feel good messages out there that just everybody is just great, you're perfect exactly how you are. And so the more that gets pumped out, and for people that don't have a very strong testimony, you know, they may just be like, oh yeah, everybody is great and Christ loves everybody and like everything's going to be fine for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just kind of like a nebulous, like, well, there's bad people out there, but they're like, these like caricatures of like what really really bad is. It's just like so obvious, but the
Yeah,
people in your everyday life, everybody's just perfect and fine and just regular people. And is that part of
that
what
is
you're
part of
thinking?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it is really interesting because there's so much, well, there's that, and then there's also just lazy learning. Um, and I don't want to get too far away from the comments you made because I really want to piggyback off of that, but I want to go back to the lazy learning aspect of this
Mm-hmm.
I because you know I for me I have mental illness and I have other challenges in my life. So does everybody else has challenges in their life.
Yeah.
Um, and my my mental health has been something that's been a huge issue for me in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways I'm overcoming it. And right now I attribute my knowledge, the deeper knowledge that I'm gaining of these basic truths and these basic principles that people tend to overlook. Um, that has been the thing that brings me so much peace, is not just because people, you talk about the feel good messages, people love like the milk, and don't want to go into the meat sometimes. Like, I mean, there's certain like blogs or whatever that you'll see, or like magazines, where it's just like, oh, look at this like LDS culture stuff, like just really like you know what I'm talking about,
I know
right?
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's frustrating sometimes because it's like I mean, not that there's bad stuff in there, but it's just you know, it's when you don't have the depth in there, it's empty.
Mm-hmm.
Like and I just want to hit the point home that digging into the meat of everything is going to help you feel good, you know? It's going to help you have that peace. Because I think sometimes people attribute, like when they hear deep doctrine, they think of all the weird crap that
Mm-hmm.
people tend to speculate about, and not against speculation in that way, of course, but I think there is so much that is missed when you just go on just the very, very, very surface level kind of doctrine. When you actually take the time to like look, like, hey, like for example, last night I was trying to figure out the word chosen, because I've heard it a lot and I've heard different definitions of it. The whole many are called but few are chosen, and um, I took the time to just dive into that, and now I feel like I have a better understanding of it and a more appreciation for it. But it's one of those things where like people might just write that off, and so I want to challenge people to look into like the basic principles like agency, or look into the grand council in heaven, where Heavenly Father gave his plan and laid it out for us. There's so much in that. There's so much into these principles, and like if we do take a deep dive into those somewhat basic things, there's I feel like I'm a broken record right now, but there's just so much out there, and I feel very passionate about it because oftentimes people will want to talk about like the like different like historical context for certain like scriptures, and that's really helpful because that can help you understand things more on a spiritual level. But sometimes I feel like people get too into the scholarly aspect of it, where they're just like looking at this thing, or they're too accepting of one random interpretation that they heard in Sunday school. Like there's just I want people to look deeper into things, even the things that they think they already know. That's
Yeah.
how I can summarize that.
There's a lot to that because again, just like you were saying about, the second coming aspect of the gospel, it's very multifaceted. So one thing I've talked about a lot on the channel is how it seems like there's a portion of people that they view church more as just like a philosophy rather than a reality. So, in other words, a way of living rather than paying attention to the more literal aspects of our existence. For example, that there really was a life before this life. It's not just like, oh, we're here, we need to be good to each other. Because it seems like a lot of the more scholarly people, they want to try and not a lot. I don't know how many, but sometimes you hear of scholarly people that kind of want to reduce things down to this is just philosophy. The Book of Mormon is inspired fiction, probably the Bible too. You know, people that just want to focus on that. They want to ignore the literal. So that's like
Mm-hmm.
one aspect to it, and that's one way that you can look at it. Um, the other the other thing is people's core motivations, why they do things. As you know, I talk a lot about narcissism on this channel. I think that you can divide people into three basic groups. You have people that are really toxic on this end. They're imitators. They're not real. If they go to church, it's because they're getting some kind of benefit out of it. Whether it's just simply getting attention, having influence, taking advantage of good people, whatever. There's any number of reasons why a toxic person would take advantage of a church culture. And then on the other extreme, you have more empathic, feeling people that have hearts, that they have true principles inside them, and they're doing it because they believe that it's actually right and those principles are solidly in them. And so when they do something, so the toxic side, you'd have, in Christ would talked about this all the time in the New Testament. You'd have somebody that would go and pay tithing, and they would do it because they wanted people to see them paying tithing. So they wanted the praise of the world, and the way that they did it back then, with they had their niche. You had religious narcissists that they're like, oh, I'm good at being, a part of my religion, look at me paying my tithing. But then you have real people that are paying tithing because they know that they're supposed to put the Lord first. They know that it's a commandment. They know that ultimately there are spiritual truths and behind paying tithing. So fakers and real people, and then a middle group. I feel that's kind of like neither. They just kind of like, it's almost like they're the don't rock the boat crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the prevailing
Yeah.
uh, group is that they're in, they don't really have principles per se. They're not like outright trying to like take advantage of people, but they also lack a backbone or solid principles. And so if they're among a bunch of like good people, they'll just kind of like fit in and like, okay. But if there's a bunch of bad people, then they don't want to rock the boat and they don't want to like get them upset. And so I think what's happening right now, for example, is in society there's a lot of different worldly philosophies being pushed that were never accepted before. And these
Mm-hmm.
people in the middle, they're having a hard time because they don't want to upset people, because their life strategy is just like, I'm just going to do my own thing. And I don't really have strong morals or strong principles, but I don't want to upset these people because this crowd over here, they're getting really really loud, and so it scares these middle people and they just kind of like fall into line. And so uh in the church, it's like it's now coming down to the question, do you really believe this? Not only the morals of the church, but also the literal aspects of the church, or do you not? And so those middle people are having a really hard time. Um, the people that are toxic, they're either going to like double down and be like, yes, I really am LDS, or they're just going to be like, you know what, this is too hard. I'm just going to go get my attention and power and control and manipulation somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So uh, that's another way to look at it. And then there's the ignorance way, where you have people that aren't doing their due diligence in studying. Maybe you have somebody that is true and they have a heart, but they're not doing the necessary work to understand uh, what this church is all about and the gospel and the Savior. And so if you're ignorant, then you don't know what's going on. And you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So anyway.
and to that, I think with ignorance, and I have to be careful sometimes. And I think in a lot of ways we all tend to do this, where it's like, hey, we really know, maybe we know a lot about a certain subject, And then when we see people at church who don't maybe know it super well, we get a little frustrated. At least that's sometimes I've noticed myself do that a little bit, and I'm like, Tyler, calm down. It's fine. Like, you don't know everything, and I don't think I do know everything, but like, I don't know. Maybe that's just a me thing, but it's interesting how that happens. And I hope nobody is hearing this conversation and thinking that, oh, how dare you not know everything about the gospel. But because there's plenty of people, who are just getting into the church, or just don't have everything. But I think maybe those who feel like they want to know more, there are many ways to study, and there are many approachable ways to do so. You don't have to be a scriptorian to not be an ignorant person, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dude, podcasts, like your podcasts, or all those like Come Follow Me podcasts that are out there, like those have, those have a lot of good. And I think it's a kickstart for people to get interested in those things. Because, we could sit here and complain about the toxic people, the ignorant people, but if you're toxic or you're ignorant, if you're watching this, you know who you are. Just kidding. But if if you maybe feel like you want to know more, there's so many resources out there, and just, if you just abide by certain principles with the information you're taking, especially just looking for authoritative sources and praying and seeking personal revelation, that's going to get you very far. And then there's a lot of information that's really good to know and can expand your vision, but is not always necessary at first. And I think it was Elder Anderson last conference who was talking about the wheat and the tares. And he talked about how, if you don't feel like you're all that you want to be now, the wheat includes the tender blades now springing up, or something like that. And so, I hope no one feels bad about themselves because they don't feel like they're something, they don't feel like a scriptorian or something like that.
Yeah.
But
I think it's a lot like the gym. Like whenever I've gone to the gym and I've worked with like a personal trainer, um, they always well, I've only done that like once, but anytime I talk to like people that are fitness going people, they usually recommend mixing it up because either you will get bored of just doing the same thing over and over again, or it's good for your body. Your body will start to get used to certain things. So you do different types of exercises, and I think that you can do the same thing with the gospel. Like, it doesn't all just have to be just purely reading the scriptures. You can we have all these resources, like you said, like we have the Leahona in the other church magazines. We have the church website. We have Jesus the Christ, which the church still promotes. And if you're new or you don't know the backstory behind Jesus the Christ, it's a really unique book because James E. Talmage was essentially tasked with putting together his research about Jesus Christ and basically consolidating it down into a book. And he became an apostle, and he wrote the book in the Salt Lake Temple. He was like every day in the Salt Lake Temple writing this book. It's the only book that has been written in a temple. And the church, if you go to the church website, it's there. When you click on Jesus Christ, because it'll give you the different options, like Jesus Christ, scriptures, church media, whatever. If you click on Jesus Christ, there's a copy of Jesus Christ on the church website. But anyway, my point is, there's many things you can do, and you should probably just do what keeps you interested. We do have to make sure that we're reading the scriptures themselves, just like we have to make sure we watch General Conference. But aside from that, there's any number of things that you can do to make it interesting. That's been one of the benefits for me doing this channel is like I've never done anything like this before, and so this is one way that I'm adding to my study. But yeah, it's not a competition. It's not. Uh, but one thing that I know that the brethren are concerned about is distractions, things that are coming from the world that are taking up your time that you could be using toward improving yourself spiritually, learning the gospel more, spending time with family, going to the temple, doing meaningful things. And so, yeah, you don't have to be the smartest, the brightest, you don't have to be a scriptorian, but you should prioritize your time so that you're making sure that you're studying every day. Every day we should be studying. And some people, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do with your time. There's a lot of people that get really into sports or hunting or cars or whatever your passion is in life. Some people put a disproportionate amount of time toward that thing and then leave little time to the Lord. And so that's something that maybe you should look at yourself and be like, okay, I need to spend more time uh learning the gospel. So that's like another facet of the whole thing, that could be
Yeah.
preventing you from getting to the meat. Because if you think that all you need to do is like go to a church, like an LDS blog or magazine, or listen to a YouTube channel like this, and that's good. I would say no, it's not. You do need to get down to the deeper things, like get into the scriptures yourself. So make sure that you're not just like, yeah, just make sure that you have time, you're freeing up time so you can go deeper.
Yeah, and YouTube can be a really good start, and but it shouldn't take over everything. Like, you shouldn't be watching Jared and I for 10 hours a day and then not reading the scriptures or listening to the brethren or something. But
Mhm.
it's it is interesting. I mean, yeah, watch Jared's channel, but
Well, and there's a
um
there's a difference between like passively watching and when you're actively searching for information, because
yeah.
you and me, we look up interesting things, but like when you meaningfully, purposely are searching for an answer, it's probably going to stick a lot better if you are the one doing the work to find it.
Mhm.
And that can be fun by itself, is like finding the answer to those questions that you're looking for, and then feeling the satisfaction afterwards. And then on top of that, it sticks better in your mind. So
Mhm.
you can't just be a spectator, you've got to actually do it.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm really grateful for you and your channel with is just your it teaches you it teaches people who watch you how to study, how to look for these things. Even if there are people who might not agree with what you say. And that's kind of been my mentality with my own channel. I kind of tell people, I'm like, hey, you don't have to agree with the point I'm making, but look into this. And I think what is valuable with your channel is that you show your authoritative sources. You show how you come to conclusions. You're always checking the comments that people will make, because sometimes people will say something, and like I'll see you in the comment section be like, oh, where'd you find that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's people like, oh, they do have something to share, but I think sometimes they just don't respond because they're like, I don't know where I found this, or I don't know where I heard this thing. And that's been something that's been really cool, because I feel like it, like seeing that has allowed me to have a stronger sense of truth in a way. So I do want to thank you for that,
Yeah.
because I think that is a huge value that your channel has. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what I learned. I'm sure most of us learn that in school, like even in high school. I think it's when in high school that they introduce you to um, writing essays, 5 paragraph essays, and the importance of, like, they tell you how you can't just plagiarize, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to use somebody else's work, you need to give appropriate credit. And unless you're doing like direct research on something, uh if you're drawing ideas from somewhere else, you need to show where those ideas are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very, 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 very important. um like, it's okay for us to like think and speculate as long as we're identifying it as such. But like, when it comes to really important questions in our beliefs, if we're going to believe something, we should be able to trace it back to something solid, like you said, an authoritative source.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um those sources are the scriptures, the prophets, and especially living prophets. I know there's like kind of a thing out there about living prophets, but we have to remember that the prophets that we have right now, they're the same as the prophets that were back then. It's just they are the ones that are currently active right now, and so they have special messages for us, and certain things they're conveying what the Lord currently wants to tell us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't find many times when there's any sort of like contradiction really between the prophets, the scriptures, or prophets and other prophets, or apostles, general authorities. Sometimes there is in like certain little aspects of the gospel where the way that I view it is sometimes in the earlier church, I think they didn't fully understand certain things, but as time went on, and you had more time to receive revelation and so forth, things became clearer. And so there might be some discrepancies between what you see now and what was done earlier in the church. And
Mm-hmm.
there's like any number of things. So you have to take those kind of things into consideration. But ultimately, if you have some kind of belief, it never hurts to double check where did that belief come from,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes you might think something just from what somebody said, like some person said something good, it was catchy, it stuck in your mind. But then you have to like stop and think and be like, wait a minute, was that just like hearsay? Was that just like a rumor, or was that real? And then go find it, you know and then
Mm-hmm.
collect it. Like, I'm all about collecting these quotes now. It's like building that foundation.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, that last part where you're talking about, like, is that just something somebody said? A story popped up in my head that I haven't thought about in a while. But when I was in seminary, we were talking about, the plan of salvation. And this girl made a comment about Satan, and she said something to the effect of, like, Satan, it just seemed like Satan just wanted everyone to come back. He didn't want to lose anybody, and was like saying all this stuff like, yeah, he just, it seemed like maybe he had a point. He wanted everyone to be saved and all this, and like, so, you know, Satan didn't go about it the right way, but like we should still, like, we could still love him or something like that. And like I just remember thinking at the time, like, that's a little funny.
Yeah.
But like, but I did also think, and there were some like kids in the class that were like, oh, you got a point. And it's like, it's not true. Like, that is just not true. And like, because I kind of thought for a while, like, well, like, why wouldn't we want to all be saved, and we all want that, but like, looking into that and Satan's motives, it's very clear that he just wanted to have glory.
Mhm.
And if we are robbed of agency, and this is the agency aspect of this is something I didn't understand for a while. But I mean, like, I understand the principle of agency, but just why it's so important. And it's not just because, like, oh, we need to choose like whose side we're gonna be on or whatever. It's, yeah, that's true, but it's we need to prepare to actively make those heavenly choices, to actively, we need to choose for ourselves to follow God's laws so that we can be granted exaltation and all that. And um but anyways, back to the this girl. Like, it was just one of those comments where, like, that could just slip by, and people might think about that, and then they might, you know like, that could lead them down a weird path if they don't look too into it.
Hmm.
And, like, that's just something, that's just one example. I mean, there's probably tons of things, and even other things that might not be as uh they might be of little consequence in the grand scheme of things, but like, just really, like, discerning those things, checking those things. um
Yeah, because the way that you convey that story, it kind of makes it seem like she either forgot part of the story or just didn't look into it deep enough.
mhm,
Because yeah, it wasn't just that he wanted to bring everyone back, you know and that's why it benefits you to do kind of like a comprehensive study. Like, if you have that, like, say you have that question come up, oh, was Satan actually good? So what you do is you pull up as much as you can about him, and that's why the church provides things like the topical guide, the index, footnotes, so on and so forth, so that you can, like, see the related content, the related scriptures and stuff like that. And you and then you get like the big picture, and it all comes together. Then you realize, wait, yeah, just like you said, really what his motivation was is, it seemed like he wanted glory. He was a narcissist. he
mhm,
he wanted he wanted the glory and the honor. And every single time that he pops up in the scriptures, he's always wanting people to worship him. That's like his defining characteristic and motivation. It wasn't that he cared about us. He just wanted to be amazing and have the
mhm.
glory. Then you realize, and then when you read the Book of Mormon and you read Lehi, where he talks about, this is like one of the deeper things. It's in the Book of Mormon where he talks about things that act and things that are acted upon. When you understand that concept, you realize, holy cow, Satan wanted to be the only thing that acts, and then all of us were supposed to be things that are acted upon. So, in
Yeah.
other words, we don't know much about what it is to be in intelligence. We know that we're made up of three things: a body, a spirit, and then at the very, very core, something called an intelligence. And it seems like the the fundamental characteristic of an intelligence is that it has the ability to act, opposed to something that's dead, that is just acted
Mhm.
upon. And so it's almost like Satan, when you think about it that way. Satan wants us all just to be dead things. Like, we don't do anything, we just passively experience. But yeah, and so no credit for us for making good decisions. All the credit's supposed to go to him. Not that we're doing things for credit, but just all the credit for everything is supposed to go to him, and
Mhm.
then we just, go along for the ride. So it's horrible. It's horrible. And
Yeah.
yeah. So
And
yeah.
yeah, and the reason why I bring that up too is just as the last, like, 3 years, however long it's been since 2020, but, like, the last 2 or 3 years, I have been studying the second coming, and I mean, so is everyone else watching this, but um, with all of that, it's allowed me to really see how much people know. Just taking a general, just my own observances online and in person with this specific topic.
Mhm.
And um, I mean, there's so many aspects to this, but, like, I see that, and then I also see you know, President Nelson talking about it so much. And the thing that I'm seeing now, especially with this last conference, President Nelson is really, he's, President Nelson, Jesus Christ are begging us to be righteous and use our agency righteously, and not to and not to just endure the last days, but to choose, the right during these storms,
Mhm.
like our agency. I don't always feel like, I think we fundamentally have an understanding of our agency, just innately. We know that, hey, we can make choices, but I feel like Satan's main goal is to help us forget that. And we need to, as things are, as wickedness is increasing, we're not here to just, sit by and try to get through. We're here to actively choose to make the right choices and to become the righteous people who are ready, worthy, and willing to receive Christ when he comes. And yeah, I mean, the whole topic of agency is really interesting. It's something I want to understand more. But the more that I've looked into it, the more that I'm seeing just how much Satan is trying to take away agency in these last days. Because
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest battle, to the core. That is the core battle right now. And I
Yeah.
mean, you could say it could be other things, but to me, at a fundamental level, it's our choices.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like right now, it's just things are so crazy. Basically, there's a lot of fear tactics, like you better comply or else you're going to be shamed. You're going to be mocked. You're going to be excluded. So there's a lot of like fear, a lot of like manipulation. Things are going to go easier for you if you just go along. So, in other words, just stop acting. If you have those like pesky principles, just put that aside and just go along with it. And then everything's going to be okay for you. And you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be able to be part of society and do all the fun things that we're doing. Whereas now, uh, more so now compared to days past, if you act based on your principles against what they're trying to get you to do, that's hard. And there is a punishment for doing that. Um, so what are you going to
Mm-hmm.
do? And so a person that acts, well, they have that ability to act, and regardless of what the consequences are, and they have the principles to know that it's going to be better to go with the Lord than it is to go with Satan, because uh our heavenly Father, his plan for us is a plan of happiness. It's to bring us joy both in this world, even though this world is a struggle, but ultimately to have happiness throughout all of eternity. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, Satan wants you to forget that. Just pay attention to what's going on right now. It's going to be better for you. Uh, we're going to get really upset at you if you go against what we want. And so you better just go along to get along, you know?
Yeah, there's the whole thing with like cancel culture and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the people who are claiming inclusivity and things like that are the people who do not allow repentance. You know, like, hey, you said this slightly insensitive thing 10 years ago. You can never work again,
Yeah.
And it is interesting because there's and I mean, there are genuine people who maybe are on a certain side of certain social issues who are, they love people and they want to help people, but there's a lot of people who weaponize that empathy, and it's an issue, and I don't want to get too political with that either.
Yeah.
But it is interesting seeing the way that discourse has changed just between the time that I was like in high school versus now, which I'm young. That was not very long ago. Um, like from 14 to 24, like discourse has changed drastically for me. And I can only imagine for those who are maybe more seasoned than I am, have seen an even greater contrast or a greater change there. Because, you know, I feel like in a lot of ways our freedom of speech has, is being infringed upon.
Hmm.
And I mean, like, there's even things like this is going up on YouTube, which is a social media platform. There are things that you cannot say. I mean, sometimes you could say for the better, but like, just even that, you have to be really cautious. Like, hey, you can't say these things because some people, this is not factual or this is misinformation and all this stuff. And there is a lot of things that are unfactual and there is a lot of misinformation. Don't get me wrong there. And
Yeah.
if you're thinking I'm of a certain political persuasion, maybe you're right, but you're probably not right. But I, I do think I want to word this correctly. Um, but there is a right and a wrong. A lot of people want to have that middle ground. We've talked about like the people who are pacified, and the people who are that middle ground people. In a lot of situations, hey, a happy medium is a good way to go. And I'm not just talking about politics, I'm talking about just everything, all the choices you make. Sometimes there's compromise and that needs to happen. But I think we forget that there is a right and a wrong thing. And sometimes we need to, we need to recognize that, hey, we need to pick a side, not to be contentious with people and not to be an us versus them kind of a thing. But we have to choose Christ. We have to choose these principles. We have to do everything that we can right now to make sure that everyone has the maximum amount of agency as possible. To me, when I think of my vote for different things, I tend to go towards what gives people in the end, what's the with the logic, what's the logical conclusion to this if this thing is passed or there's this decision being made. Does this allow for the maximum amount of agency for everyone? That's kind of my take on that, because of how important it is. And when we're pacified by these things, when we're so sick of everything, we're so sick of all the arguments, we're so sick of all the political garbage that's out there, the social garbage that's out there on all sides. I'm not pointing fingers at just one side, it's everyone. We just think this is too overwhelming, I'm not going to act, which causes for more heartache and pain. And I guess my whole point in this is we need to remember that we can't just be idle. We have to make choices even during hard times. And that choice is Christ-like living. That choice is being informed as much as you can, even though there's a lot of voices out there. And this is not just about votes, it's just about making your own life choices, about figuring out where you stand on things. And it's like a lot of people try to separate the gospel from their other facets of life, but the gospel is literally every part of my life. It's every aspect of my life and my choices. I'm not perfect at it. There's plenty of things that I do that you could argue go against the gospel in some way or another. But I don't separate those things. And to me, we're at a point in time right now where we cannot throw away the gospel. We cannot just set it aside. It needs to play a part in every decision we make. Because if we allow ourselves to be pacified, we're going to lose our agency in one way or another, whether that's socially or politically or spiritually.
Well,
Sorry, I feel
it's
like
like, oh, God. Yeah. It's like,
uh,
it makes me think about what President Nelson said. I think he said it a number of times that, the gospel is exactly what the world needs right now. And it sounds generic. Okay. But it's not. A lot of times we go to these like hot button issues, like,
mm-hmm,
the attack on marriage, or like what we were talking about, freedom of speech and stuff like that. And those are really critical issues. But if everybody, instead of like separating uh their church life from their political life, like what you were talking about, if everyone truly lived the gospel, and I'm talking about the core principles of the gospel, loving other people, you know having empathy, true empathy, not fake empathy, but like true empathy, um service, wanting to have peace and stability. So instead of like letting things devolve into these big arguments that get really nasty, if you're like, oh, you know what, I don't like that, I want to talk on a more civil level, and I want to be um the least amount of inflammatory that I possibly can be. I want to make sure I care more about that other person than I do about our politics and, burning a bridge, for example.
mm-hmm,
So like when you read in the New Testament or in the Book of Mormon, but you read in the New Testament, you read the Sermon on the Mount, those things that Christ taught. He basically taught us how to be good, decent people. And
yeah,
so if everybody lived that way, everyone would be a lot more like moderate in seeking. I don't mean moderate as far as like good and evil, but moderate as far as like um the way that we live in this world. What's it called? Uh when two people have different needs, but they work together in order to
compromise.
compromise. I was having a moment there. Compromise. Um, things would just go so much smoother if we all lived those principles that Christ taught. But
mm-hmm,
what you have, unfortunately, is you have people that do not believe in those principles. They're selfish. They want attention, power, control. They have an agenda, and they may, say that they're Christian. They may say that they're a member of the church, but just because you say that you are one doesn't mean that that's who you are on the inside. And so they
mm-hmm,
do everybody else a big disservice, because then they muddy the water, and then it's like, oh, you're a Christian, so what? That doesn't mean anything. And
yeah,
unfortunately, that's kind of true, because we can't see everybody's hand. We can't see who they really are inside. There's like Christians that aren't really Christians. They're just Christians in name only. And then you have real Christians, the real deal. You know what I mean? And
mm-hmm,
so anyway, I guess the point I'm getting to is just like, if everybody lived the gospel principles, love, society would go so much better, so much smoother. There'd be less division, and everything would be great. It just, I don't know. Sorry, I kind of got
yeah.
lost in my thoughts
To
there.
kind of, no, you're good. I guess circling back, if people just understood the plan.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so funny, but like, well, it's true, but it is just, it just goes back to that. And because when you look back from the very beginning, people had a great misunderstanding of Heavenly Father's plan. And we see that nowadays. I think I've heard you mention it before in previous episodes.
Hi, everybody. So at this point of the video, something went wrong with the audio. I'm not exactly sure what happened, so we had to finish the interview there. But I do plan to have Tyler on again sometime in the future, so you can look forward to that. In the meantime, if you're new, make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Also make sure to share it. And then also make sure to subscribe to Tyler's channel. Again, the link for his channel is in the description below. And I'll talk to you guys later.